Welcome back. You are watching The Full View. Of course, the dominant story today is going to be, at least in South Africa, the march by many women at various points throughout the country standing up against gender-based violence. We know, of course, research has shown that 51% of all women who are murdered are killed by an intimate partner, and that's one of the issues that was at the center of #Total Shutdown. Well, standing by now in Durban for more on the march there is our reporter Sibongakonke Mbatha. Sibongakonke, good evening to you. Emotive scenes we've just seen in Pretoria. How did things play out in KZN?
A very good evening to you, Bongani, as well as Francis. Just to quickly reflect on how the #Total Shutdown leg of Durban went today. This very morning, it kick-started at Curry's Fountain, where we saw a few hundreds. But as the day progressed towards the beginning of the official march, we saw the march gaining momentum. And as it moved along the Durban CBD, we saw a buzz of activity. We saw numbers growing immensely. The organizers were expecting 4,000 people were expected to participate. But as the march progressed along the route, we saw numbers exceeding their expectation. And as we spoke to them once they reached the Durban City Hall, they did also highlight that the support has been overwhelming. But for them, it's also a reflection that this plight that they're trying to address is something that is affecting women across the board, which is of course something that was indeed reflected in their memorandum which they delivered to provincial leadership, because one of the organizers did highlight that amongst their plights, they did in detail highlights the many areas that they want to be corrected. It is, of course, overall gender-based violence, but they wanted the masses to understand that it goes beyond just sexual abuse, sexual harassment, rape. They also touched on corrective rape, which is something that greatly affects the LGBTI community. They also touched on health workers, how they are treated in public health facilities. They also touched on hospitals. They also touched on education, how children are raped in schools, how children are bullied in schools, how teachers are sexually harassing children in schools. We will recall that in KwaZulu-Natal, personally, I have covered a number of stories where either a young child has been raped and then killed by their perpetrator, burnt alive in some instances. There was also a case that was done by my colleague, the case of Zolile Khumalo, which was a story that the Durban office really covered immensely, where this young MUT student was shot and killed by her ex-boyfriend in a resident facility, university institution facility. So there have been a number of cases, even far north KwaZulu-Natal. We've had cases where women have been beheaded, burnt, and then buried in shallow graves. There were many people there. There were many people in support of those silent voices. And it baffled me, but also saddened me at the same time, where some of the elderly, which we were speaking to, they were saying that even us, we are not safe. There were cases in previous years, even recently, earlier in the year, of the elderly also being victims of rape and assault. There were cases of the elderly being burnt, some of them being burnt alive for something very, very small. And always the common perpetrator, it's always men. But they're not really attacking them. They're just asking that the men of this country must just love them, protect them as well. So they're saying that they're calling on the government to re-strategize its a movement towards ending gender-based violence, not just in KZN, but in the entire country, because this is, of course, a national program. Because if you can see just behind me in my visuals, there was quite moments where women were demonstrating their emotions, lying down on the floor, expressing emotion that this is very painful.
I mean, obviously, a lot of the stories that you are telling there are stories of solidarity, stories of sisterhood. That's really the sense what we're getting on the ground. A plethora of issues being spoken about by women across the country.